As we saw at the Miss Univers pageant, the BDS movement tried to keep Miss South Africa from coming to Israel, a country they call apartheid. The ice cream makers Ben&Jerry's also made a decision to stop doing business in what they called the occupied Palestinian territories, otherwise known as the West Bank. Many believe the danger of BDS goes far beyond ice cream and a beauty pageant. Ben&Jerry's decision gave a boost to the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS, and raised questions about where it gets its funding.
You've got a lot of groups that are operating on, what appear to be shoestring budgets, but yet we continue to see the BDS movement flourish and thrive across various campuses. I think what it means is that this is a very decentralized funding network.
In 2016, Jonathan Schanzer testified before Congress and shared his research into the funding of the BDS movement.
But then finally stumbled on one group called American Muslims for Palestine. Many of them worked for charities that were previously shut down by the U.S. government for supporting Hamas. This, of course, came as a surprise to us. The more we dug, the more we realized that there was a network, a relatively small one, but apparently influential, that was active on campus. I think it ultimately demonstrated that even if this group is not engaging in anything illegal, and I think it's important to stress that, that their background is important, that this is not just simply a social justice movement, but rather a group that is motivated by very ideological reasons.
Schanzer tells CBN News the network is doing now what it did in 2016. In a related development, Israel recently targeted 6 NGOs for aiding the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP. That group is designated as a terror organization by the U.S.
So what we're also seeing is that a number of these so-called charities and NGOs really cover for terror groups like PFLP and others as a way to funnel money that ultimately goes to these groups for the purpose of carrying out boycott activities.
Arsen Ostrovsky says boycott activities go back 20 years to the movement's beginning at a UN conference in South Africa designed to fight racism.
It ended up coming together to promote racism and against one state and one state only, the Jewish state Israel.
Annette Will says that helped propel BDS to become a key weapon against the Jewish state. She points out the main BDS tactic is to demonize and delegitimize Israel. Through its signs are placards.
The placard strategy is the equations that everyone who goes to an anti-Israel demonstration sees on their placards. Zionism equals, or Israel equals, or the Star of David equals. These words in our collective consciousness, they connote evil. So what happens through the placard strategy is basically people are exposed to an ongoing refrain that says Zionism, Israel, Star of David equals evil.
That, according to Wilf, promotes the idea of Israel as the global villain.
There is no greater good in this world than the eradication of evil. So if you create this mental mindset, you create a global mindset that there is an evil out there, and the evil is Israel and Zionism. You're basically saying, because Israel, Zionism, and the Star of David are evil, whatever you do to rid the world of this evil will be justified.
Ostrovsky says this helps explain the growth of violence worldwide against Jews earlier this year during Israel's war with Hamas in Gaza.
Now, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It is a direct result of this pervasive discourse singling out and vilifying the Jewish state for opprobrium, and that goes to the very core, the very center of what the BDS movement is doing.
And since much of this discourse happens at colleges and universities, BDS creates an unsafe place for young Jewish students.
Especially students who identify as Zionist or pro-Israel.
The economic impact of BDS on Israel seems minimal, especially as the startup nation gets financially stronger through ties with its Arab neighbors and the Abraham Accords. Schanzer warns, however, the battleground is not so much the economy, but the hearts and minds of the next generations.
Particularly on college campuses, teaching them, I think, a lot of falsehoods about Israel, about its history, about its politics. And this will certainly make things more difficult for Israel in the future as it battles future generations of what we would call BDSers. And I think this really represents the great challenge. not a well-funded movement, as some people might suggest. It is the dedication to the destruction of the Jewish state. And unfortunately, this is something that has been around for 7+ decades and counting.